to connect and familiarize themselves with the program, I'm here with John Collins and Amy Jean Levine for an informal conversation about the present and the future of studies on Second Temple Judaism and Christian origins. All of you in attendance are welcome to interact with us by using the Q&A function that is located in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. So, welcome John and AJ. Thank you very much for being with us today. I would like to start with the question about the current status of studies in our field. In your experience, what have been the most significant changes since you started studying the period? Okay, John first.
I started a little bit before AJ. I wasn't in at the very first meetings of the pseudepigrapha seminar. George Nicholsburg may well have been, I think. My first one was 1972. And at that point, Jim Charlesworth launched the idea of doing the new edition of the Apocrypha and Pseudepigrapha. And that, together with the Sparks edition in England, it was a huge thing. Now, we could talk about that. I think in a way that has been the launching pad for everything that's going on in the Enoch seminar. At the time, I was quite frustrated because I know my own work on the Sibylline Oracles was finished about 1975 or 1976, and it didn't appear until 1983. But I would have to grant Jim the wisdom of doing them as a collection. And this had impact in a way that the German series JSH or Z never had. So that was one huge thing. And the other huge thing was when all the Dead Sea Scrolls became available in the 90s. And back in the 70s, the pseudepigrapha was an exciting field. Every year we would discuss some texts that most of us had never heard of before. Things like the Testament of Job that we might never otherwise have read. And then in the 90s, all sorts of new texts started appearing. So I would say the main thing that's happened in my time is making those texts available. And I think a lot has been done, and probably a lot remains to be done in it. But at the same time, those were two huge changes in the field. AJ.
Thank you, John. What about you, AJ?
John is just slightly older than I am. It's thanks to people like John and Bob Kraft from the Penn Seminar, Jim Vanderkam, George Nicholsburg, that I got socialized into this field. For me, John, when you were doing this in 1972, I was still in high school. What I found, and this is from the 80s and the early 90s, the introduction of more than just linguistics and straight historical criticism, the rise of feminism. My first paper for the pseudepigrapha group in the early 80s was a feminist analysis of Judith. And I remember a number of people sitting around at the table going, what the hell was that? But they seemed to like it because they invited me back. So it was alternative voices. And the other thing that I've seen changing, but it's also something I have a worry about, was the integration of Christian origins into Second Temple Judaism, as well as the movement to bring in not only people working in, say, Apocrypha, Pseudepigrapha, and Dead Sea Scrolls, but also looking at archaeology, looking at classics, and then looking at alternative methodologies by which we can get purchase on what we do, macro-sociological modeling, for example. So changes in method in particular.
You know, I vividly remember that seminar on Judith. And I remember it mainly because of a paper by Nira Stone, in which she said there's no sexual imagery in Judith. And then she showed a slide of Judith holding a sword sticking up for all the world like a phallus.
Yes, well, phallic imagery was not a term that was
construct
usually
that
bantered about in pseudepigraphal studies at the time.
Yeah.
So it's come back in subsequently. The first volume for the SBL's Early Judaism and its Literature, of which some of you here were actually participating in, was on, it was called Women Like This, which is a comment, it's a pullout from the book of Judith, with women like this who can stand against them. But I thought women would like this, so I wound up editing it. So even when pseudepigraphical studies and Second Temple Judaism studies proper entered the SBL, it entered it with a feminist lens, which I think was quite progressive on the part of the SBL.
Yes, although I think, you know, we haven't, that's an area where a lot more could be done. The other one, well, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
I'm of course younger than but for me, what is changed, I remember when I entered as a student the field in the 80s, we were discussing a lot about the diversity of Second Temple Judaism. I remember the idea of a sort of monolithic approach was still very strong. So I was fascinated by this idea of multiple forms of Judaism. And the second thing that I found particularly fascinating were the idea of seeing Christianity and rabbinic Judaism as parallel elements, parallel groups that emerged from the diverse world of Second Temple Judaism. These were, at the time, were quite new ideas. Now it's become mainstream, I think. Okay, and for me, it's been very exciting to see how the field has developed. And also, I think that the idea that AJ, you were saying about diversity is really very, very, very important. Because I think that we are now much more sensitive to the diversity of the period, and at the same time, our approaches to the period has become much more diverse in terms of methodology. One very important thing is for me is this, and of course I agree with you, John, that many things have been accomplished and many still remain to be done. And I would like to ask, to go on the second part of our conversation, asking you, in your opinion, what are the main challenges for future research in the field? But before you answer the question, I would like to listen to what three young scholars in the field have to say. We have invited Isaac Oliver, who is associate professor at Bradley University in the United States. Then Rodney Carruthers, a recent PhD from the University of Michigan, adjunct at Ashland Theological Seminary, and would be visiting assistant professor at Gustavus Adolphus College. And Sofanit Abebe from Ethiopia, who is completing her PhD dissertation at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. So they are really living examples on how the study of the period has become global and diverse. So I would like to listen to their voices. Maybe Isaac, you want to start?
Yeah, so we had opportunity to briefly coordinate with each other beforehand. So actually, Sofanit will go and Rodney, okay, and I'll be last.
Good.
Yeah. So yes, thank you for this opportunity. My first point has to do with me being an Ethiopian with a keen interest in the Ethiopian and Eritrean Orthodox churches, for whom, as you know, prominent texts like 1 Enoch and Jubilees form scripture understood to be the living word of God, and thus formulating a living tradition. I believe the guild would greatly benefit from a consideration of the afterlife of these texts in contemporary Ethiopic contexts that form a living tradition around texts of the Second Temple period. And in this regard, in addition to the direction my colleague Brooke Ayala's recent work has taken, I think there can be much to learn in engaging the impact of Second Temple Jewish tradition, not only on Ethiopic liturgic or scribal traditions, but also in contemporary literary and oral Ethiopic imaginaries. I think this would attune us as historians to diverse voices within the ancient sources themselves. Such an exercise would also help to refine methodologies of reading, such as post-colonial studies that actively draw on expressions of resistance in the contemporary world that couldn't help but take inspiration, albeit in complex ways, from one Enoch and Jubilees in particular, but in general, and I think more significantly, the inspiration also comes from thought systems and modes of thinking that run through Second Temple Jewish texts. And my second and final point has to do with my PhD project and what I think is a promising way forward in interdisciplinary approaches that combine methods of analysis from the humanities with more traditional approaches. I have in mind, in particular, spatial theory that is currently underway and informs some of the works of colleagues here at the Enoch Seminar. A critical theory of space, which entails a conception of specified values within which diverse people carry on their embodied existence in a non-monolithic context. So this an appreciation of space as an agent that shapes lives and is open to being creatively reconfigured through texts and ancient authors, I believe gives us access to some of the ways in which entrenched order was being challenged in that particular period, and alternative spaces constructed as a form of resistance. This in turn will continue to offer us new and exciting possibilities for the study of the social or intellectual history of the period. And I also think that this particular method of analysis would open new vistas in our pursuit to read Second Temple Jewish texts alongside the New Testament. Thank you. Rodney, back to you.
All right, thank you. Let me just say good morning to everyone again, and to Gabrielle and Kelly and Jason and Joshua. You all have done a fantastic job putting all of this together. Lorenzo, I see you there as well. Good to see you. It's good to see so many faces that I haven't seen in a long time. Isaac as well. So let me share a couple of ideas that I had about things that we could do moving forward. So for me, some ideas revolve around two questions. First, what are some of the ways that we can read and interpret writings of the Second Temple period? What are some different ways we can do this? Usually these writings are read through the lens of various Jewish sects, or comparatively with writings from other cultures, for example, Greek and Persian. More attention, however, should be given to the writing practices that were current during the time period. And this is somewhat of a shameless plug of some of the work that I did for my dissertation, but this is still something that I think should be given more attention. So these practices are often found in classical compositional texts such as Theon, Quintilian, and Demetrius. Examining writing handbooks and comments that writers make about literary composition provides us with a sharper lens through which we can interpret the details in these texts. They inform us, for example, about how writers conceived of literary techniques, such as purposefully adding embellishment or miraculous occurrences to a writing. This type of work continues to be done with New Testament Gospels and some Jewish apocryphal texts such as 4 Maccabees. And in this regard, I'm thinking of my colleague David Da Silva's work on 4 Maccabees. But it should also be applied to a wider range of literature from the time period, for example, the Sibylline Oracles, which John Collins was talking about earlier. Knowledge of the writing practices and thoughts of the authors also offers insight into how they intended their text to function, as well as how their contents were expected to be received by their audiences based on current customs. So the first one, looking at the different writing practices that led to the production of text. My second question goes in a different direction, actually further east, and asks, how did religions and philosophies, for example, in India and China, interact with the beliefs, customs, and especially literature of Second Temple Judaism? I thought about the story of the mother and her 7 sons in 2nd and 4 Maccabees and how prominent its theme of patient endurance is in Jewish and later Christian martyrdom accounts, along with its portrayal of the antagonist and the graphic nature of the physical torture administered by the ruler Antiochus, juxtaposed to the purity, wisdom, and patience of the protagonists. When reading about the Bodhisattva as a preacher of patience in Buddhist writings and his slow, painstaking torture at the hands of a king as a lesson of patience and reward of ascension to heaven, I couldn't help but wonder about the clear parallels between the stories. How many more similarities might there be between Eastern texts and cultures that led to theological and literary developments in Judaism? Again, immediately I think of interesting similarities between the birth of Jesus of Nazareth, Melchizedek and 2nd Enoch, and the Shakyamuni of Buddha and Buddhist writings. More comparative work between Jewish and Eastern texts of this sort could yield insight into the diverse evolution we see in some Jewish texts regarding suffering, piety, and afterlife expectations. I would certainly say that some of these ideas should also be done with various religions and cultures within Africa as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Isaac.
Yes, greetings everyone. So I'd like to second, even third, what's been said here by my colleagues with 3 points. First, I expect to see further integration between Second Temple Jewish studies and New Testament and early Christian studies. I know there's been unprecedented work done in the previous decades, but centuries of isolation, even antagonism between Judaism and Christianity means that there's still much work to do. Anthony Saldarini's call in the late 90s or early 90s, I believe, to study the Gospel of Matthew along with Second Temple Jewish texts such as 2nd Baruch, 4 Ezra, Apocalypse of Abraham, Josephus, and even the earliest strata of the Mishnah still stands, in my opinion, especially when we extend that call to other New Testament and early Christian texts. In this regard, I think the Enoch Seminar has been a wonderful place to promote such endeavors. I refer to the colloquia and non-Geroni meetings we've had before on Paul and on John, for example. And in the works, we have Matthew this fall, at SBL, as well as Luke for 2021, a colloquium, and also a non-Geroni meeting that we're planning for 22. So stay tuned. The second point, the giants of Second Temple Jewish studies have provided us with the foundation to continue work. We now have critical editions, translations, commentaries, even a dictionary, and now an encyclopedia devoted exclusively to Second Temple Judaism. I refer, of course, to the Erdman's early Dictionary of Early Judaism, edited by John Collins and Daniel Harlow, and of course the T&T Clark's Encyclopedia of Second Temple Judaism, edited by Lawrence Stuckenbrook and Daniel Gertner. So for us younger scholars, the challenge is trying to find something new and meaningful to say in this terra cognita, And one way forward that I see that is already underway is reception history. There's plenty of territory there to explore. Here too, the Enoch Seminar has provided us with some interesting initiatives. The Najroni meeting, for example, in Israel in 2014, the Voice of Jacob, which explored the Christian transmission of Second Temple Jewish traditions. The Seventh Najroni meeting on the early reception of Paul, the Second Temple Jew. So there's a lot to do here. I'd second and third what was said earlier about also exploring how Second Temple Jewish traditions continue to impact living traditions. And so encourage and have endorsed indeed the book that just came out by Baruch Ayale, First Enoch as Early Christian Scripture, which is available with Whip and Stock. I would like to see a whole conference that considers the country that has preserved and kept Enoch alive for us. In this regard, I shouldn't fail to also mention early Islamic origins. We have now 3 Najroni meetings that have been hosted and devoted to the study of the Quran and early Islam by the Early Islamic Studies Seminar. And hopefully we'll soon see the proceedings published. I'm currently co-editing the volume for the second and third meetings. It's true that it's customary now for specialists in Second Temple Judaism and New Testament to work together, but there's still a lot of work to be done with studying the Quran along with Jewish and Christian traditions in both directions, in a way that avoids the pitfalls of Orientalism and supersessionism that have affected Islam, the study of Islam and Judaism, respectively. This brings me to my third point. I think that in the context of Second Temple Jewish studies, we do have some topics that have been neglected somewhat, at least when we compare it to biblical studies. I think of gender, race, ethnicity, and nationalism. Of course, these are topics that are very much apropos right now. And the Enoch Seminar is devoted to the historical analysis of Second Temple Judaism and Christian origins. But we shouldn't forget that Second Temple Jewish studies itself was largely shaped in response to events that overtook humanity in the previous century towards the middle of the 20th century. And that we can find a way, I think, to promote and secure the historical enterprise that we endorse, while also being attentive and sensitive to the events that are happening around us right now. In this regard, we already have one endeavor that points us in a direction. Shana Scheinfeld and Kathy Ahrensberger's Najroni meeting devoted to women and gender that was held already, and the forthcoming one that unfortunately was postponed this year due to COVID, shows us a path forward. So these are the 3 things that I share with you.
Thank you so much, Sophanit, Rodney, and Isaac. And I would like now to have some final comments from John and MEG about the future of the studies. John, maybe.
Let me just say this. I'm very pleased to hear some of the issues that have been raised. Over the last 50 years, it seems to me that specialization is both the boon and the bane of Second Temple studies. Back 50 years ago, there were very few specialists in Second Temple. Now, without the specialization, you wouldn't get the detailed work, the commentaries and all of that. And that's been great. But I'm afraid that we now also have a generation of people who are primarily trained in Second Temple and who need to broaden out. And I think if we don't do that, in the end, we end up being a rabbit hole.
Thank you.
This may be the flip side of what John just said. In terms of words, oh my God, this field is in good hands. You all are fabulous. I can now retire because people can take over. What worries me coming from New Testament studies is in part one of the blessings of the methodological broadening. In New Testament studies, as we are spending increasing amount of time doing literary critical work within the text without looking at the historical context or even paying attention to how writing was done in antiquity, looking at the crayon and all that. As we look at reception history and as we read from our own subject position or social location, like I as a fill in my postmodern identity, the historical context of the New Testament is only one of various questions that one can pose. And in fact, in a number of settings, including seminaries and divinity schools, is not terribly an important one, because for churches and for theologically oriented people, what the text means to me today is much more important than how it took its shape within Second Temple Judaism. And consequently, I'm seeing within popular New Testament studies and in preaching, a lot of the negative and incorrect views of this monolithic, awful early Judaism is starting to creep back in because history is becoming less important. So I would want Second Temple Judaism studies increasingly to have a bearing on New Testament studies. And when people write books about New Testament, they get Second Temple Judaism wrong. I want everybody on this website to write in and say, please don't do that because it's bad history and it's also bad theology.
Yes, I think it's definitely true. I mean, because I think one of the major challenges we have is probably to integrate, let's say, traditional methodologies with new methodology, to be inclusive, instead of seeing these methodologies as exclusive to one another. I think it will be a big challenge for the future decades. And of course, the integration of Christian studies and Judaism studies. We have done a lot, but still a lot must be done. I mean, there is still a lot to do so that Second Temple Judaism becomes part of Christian studies. And also we have to do a lot because Second Temple Judaism becomes also part of Judaic studies, because very often the study of the Second Temple is neglected also in Judaic studies. I think that we had a very, very rich conversation that really has laid the foundation for our conference of today. And without any further hesitation, I will allow now Kelly Koblenz-Bauch to offer us the opening remarks for our conference on the concept of evil in Second Temple Judaism. I would like to thank John Collins, Imogen Levine, Sofanetta Bebe, Rodney Carruthers, and Isaac Oliver de Oliveira for their very interesting and important remarks. And now, Kelly, is your turn. Kelly is the Vice President, Vice Director of the Enoch Seminar, to give the official opening remarks for our conference. Thank you, Kelly.
My pleasure. On behalf of the entire body of the Enoch Seminar and the founding director, Gabriella Boccaccini, and Vice Director, Lauren Stuckenbrook, I wish to welcome all the participants to this first Enoch Seminar online. Let me begin by introducing to you, if you're just joining us, Gabriella Boccaccini, whom many of you know already, either through his scholarship and mentoring, or through your previous participation in the Enoch Seminar, or attending our introductory session earlier. We wish to mention also that Lauren Stuckenbrook could not be with us today, though he has sent to participants the following greeting. Thank you all for your messages and get well wishes. I'm really sorry not to participate in the conference this year, but look forward to being with you again in the future. All the best for a constructive and inspired conversation. How is the sound, by the way? It's good? Okay. Lauren, we all miss you and we send our best wishes. For those of you who are new to the Enoch Seminar, I'd like to share a word now about this professional society. Founded in 2001 by Director Gabriella Boccaccini, The Enoch Seminar is an open and inclusive forum of international specialists in early Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Scholars with different methodologies and approaches and at various stages of their academic careers, from graduate students to senior scholars, have the opportunity to meet and share the results of their research. In this global world and 21st century academia, we are particularly committed to fostering diversity in all its forms and promoting dialogue and mutual understanding among Jews, Christians, and Muslims. To underscore this commitment to diversity, the Enoch Seminar wishes to share the following statement on harassment and discrimination. The Enoch Seminar actively welcomes international scholars, persons of different religious, racial, and ethnic backgrounds and sexual orientation, and seeks gender parity as well as scholars at different stages in their academic careers. The Enoch Seminar wishes to foster an ethos of inclusivity in all its sponsored events. It requires the highest level of professional and ethical behavior, free of all forms of harassment and discrimination from all its members and anyone participating in any seminar or affiliated function. The Board of Directors is presently composing a code of conduct for members of and participants in the seminar and will convene an ethics committee to which any complaints concerning this code will be reported and evaluated in strictest confidence. As many of you know, the Enoch Seminar fosters scholarship on the ancient Mediterranean world that transcends conventional and often isolated disciplinary and methodological boundaries. We encourage discussion among specialists in the Hebrew Bible, Second Temple Judaism, New Testament, late antique Judaism and Christianity, and early Islam through our many international meetings. The Enoch Seminars, the Graduate Enoch Seminars, the non-Jeroni meetings, and the Enoch Colloquia. These meetings tend to be characterized by a distinctive format where papers circulate in advance and are thoroughly discussed among participants and then disseminated to a wider audience via publication. For this meeting, cognizant of the current moments and its logistical challenges, we have experimented with a slightly different format, more similar to that of the Enoch Colloquia, with brief oral presentations and time for discussion among participants. Since we began planning this event in March, we saw this online seminar as a sign of resilience and unity in a moment in which so many summer events were postponed or canceled one after another. While it's not possible to do justice to the rich history of the seminar, I'll offer the following. Since 2001, there have been 10 major biennial seminars, 7 graduate Enoch seminars, 11 non-Jeroni meetings, and 3 Enoch colloquia. These have been held in numerous locales that range from Venice to Princeton, from Budapest to Montreal, and from Lausanne to Jerusalem. The Enoch Seminar not only offers meetings, but a context or platform for study of early Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The Enoch Seminar hosts a website with numerous resources that include book reviews and a newsletter, as well as For Enoch, the online encyclopedia of Second Temple Judaism, Christian and Islamic origins. I have not yet mentioned the numerous publications that have resulted from these collaborative gatherings, scholarship which has had an impact on the meetings themselves in advancing the study of early Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. These accomplishments to date are impressive. From a gathering of experts in Florence in 2001, this idea of Gabriele Boccaccini to bring together an international gathering of scholars for robust, sustained, and collegial conversations has yielded a rich harvest. But as the Enoch Seminar looks to a 20-year anniversary, I think its founding director would tell you that the best is yet to come, and looks forward also to widening the circle of those who would like to participate in the Enoch Seminar and associated activities. Thus, with an eye to the future, there is a session scheduled on Tuesday from 4 to 5:15 p.m. dedicated to graduate students, as the Enoch Seminar would like to think proactively with the next generation of scholars in our field about their contributions, and a session on Wednesday from 4:15 to 5 p.m. that will take up what's next for the Enoch Seminar. Your ideas and your suggestions for the future of the Enoch Seminar will be most welcome, and this meeting is open to all who are interested to attend future events of the Enoch Seminar. There are many people who make possible the work of the Enoch Seminar, and I'd like to recognize and thank Dr. Jeffrey Weidlinger, Director of the Frankel Center for Judaic Studies, for the center's generous support. Dr. Weidlinger has agreed to share a brief word with participants. Joshua, if you please.
No volume.
All right, everyone.
Good.
Joshua.
Of evil in Second Temple Judaism and Christian origins. The Frankel Center is very pleased to be a sponsor of this event and are grateful to Professor Gabriella Boccaccini for allowing us the opportunity to partake of this event. I also want to take this opportunity to let you all know about the Frankel Institute for Advanced Judaic Studies year on Second Temple Judaism and the Challenges of Diversity, which will take place in the 2021-2022 year. Some of you may know that the Frankel Institute for Advanced Judaic Studies here at the University of Michigan offers a residential fellowship where about 10 to 15 scholars from around the world come to Ann Arbor for the year in order to do research on a common theme. And in 2 years, our common theme will be Second Temple Judaism, the Challenges of Diversity, and that year will be led by our very own Gabriella Boccaccini. We encourage applicants to apply to look at a wide range of topics relating to diversity in the Second Temple period, diversity of ethnicity, religion, social status, gender, age, and ability, which were very much a feature of the ancient Mediterranean world, just as they are a feature of our present. So the applications for that are due in October of this year for the following year. So again, really encourage you to apply for that. And in the meantime, again, I want to welcome all of you virtually and thank you for the opportunity to allow the Frankel Center to be a part of this event. So thank you very much and enjoy your conference and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Weilinger. We'd like to thank the Michigan Center for Early Christian Studies and to acknowledge its president, Mr. Jim Lepowski. We also wish to thank the Alessandro Nangeroni International Endowment, represented by Mrs. Gabriella Nangeroni and Andrea Musumeci. They are all in attendance with us today, and we're very grateful for their continuous support. And of course, our appreciation is due to the organizers of this Enoch Seminar Online, Gabriella Boccaccini and Lorenzo Di Tommaso, with Miriam Brandt, Rodney Carruthers, John Collins, Deborah Forger, Benjamin Reynolds, Lauren Schiffman, Archie Wright, Jackie Weiss-Rhodes, and Jason Zarowski. And to all panelists and respondents and discussants, it's also important for us to say thank you and to recognize Joshua Scott, a very talented doctoral student at the University of Michigan who has attended to many of the technical aspects that have made this Enoch Seminar Online possible. And to Jason van Ehrenkrook, the chief editor of the Enoch Seminar website and newsletter. As you know, registration for the Enoch Seminar Online is free. We'd like to thank those who have given a contribution to support the ongoing activities of the Enoch Seminar. We are thankful to those who in the next days will follow their example by giving a donation too. The life of the Enoch Seminar depends upon the support of its members. We turn now to our award ceremony. The Enoch Seminar Life Achievement Award was created to honor longstanding members in gratitude for their exceptional contribution to the field of Second Temple Jewish Studies and their generous service in the Enoch Seminar. Each awardee will be introduced by a colleague and will have the opportunity to address briefly the participants if they wish. The awardees are PAOLO SACCHI, George Nicholsberg, Robert Kraft, Michael Knibb, Michael Stone, and Devore DeMont, and they'll be introduced respectively by Gabriella Boccaccini, myself, Annette Yoshiko Reed, John Collins, Lorenzo Di Tommaso, and Jonathan Ben Dove. Gabriella.
Thank you, Kelly, for your words of introduction. I think we are ready now for this very important moment of recognition of some of the members of our seminars that have given such an important contribution to the study of Second Temple Judaism and to the life of the Enoch Seminar. It is my honor to introduce our first awardee, Paolo Sacchi, Professor Emeritus at the University of Turin, Italy, and a very proud native of Florence, as I am. Professor Sacchi is internationally known for his groundbreaking studies on Jewish apocalypticism, and in particular on the books of Enoch. His major works have been translated into English: Jewish Apocalyptic and Its History in 1996, and the history of the Second Temple period in the year 2000. Sacchi was also the founder of the journal Enoch in 1979. A respected international scholar, in Italy, Sacchi is even more than that. He is a living legend. In the 1980s, I had the privilege of being a PhD student of his at the University of Turin. But in Italy, everyone who deals with Second Temple Judaism is a student of Sacchi. He created the field, published the first Italian translation of the Old Testament pseudepigrapha and the Septuagint, promoted studies on the Dead Sea Scrolls. A devoted teacher and a brilliant lecturer, he taught popular classes at the university and reached a large audience even outside the classroom. Sacchi completed his studies at the University of Florence in the early 1950s. In 1956, he published his dissertation. It was a work of New Testament philology, at the origin of the New Testament. Immediately, his interests shifted from the New Testament itself to the environment in which the New Testament was born, from philology to intellectual history, from Christian studies to Judaic studies. In 1976 came Storia del mondo giudaico, History of the Jewish World, a sort of first edition of his history of the Second Temple period, and a revolutionary book in itself. Sacchi realized that in order to write an intellectual history of Second Temple Judaism, it was necessary to get rid not only of the canonical boundaries, but also of any categorization that would collect documents according to their literary genre. The apocalyptic literature did not represent a unitary movement, but it was possible to identify within the apocalyptic literature a certain distinctive tradition of thought that attested to by the Enoch literature. His book was titled Jewish Apocalyptic and Its History, but in reality, it was the first attempt to write a history of what would be later called Enochic Judaism as a fundamental component of ancient Jewish thought. Sacchi's work was one of those scholarly streams that most directly inspired the formation of the Enoch Seminar. When his work finally met what Klaus Koch and Helge Vanvig were doing in Europe, Michael Stone in Israel, and George Nickesburg, John Collins, and Jim Vanderkam were doing in the United States. SACCHI was one of the leading participants in all the first meetings of the Enoch seminar. And even after his retirement, has remained a close friend of ours. Many of us will remember his very emotional visit to our latest Enoch seminar in Florence, just 1 year ago. In 2015, SACCHI published an autobiographic account of his intellectual and spiritual journey. It is in Italian, but it's a fascinating reading about his meetings with some of the most distinguished Italian specialists in antiquity, such as Giorgio Pasquali, Sabatino Moscati, and Giovanni Pugliese Caratelli, as well as about the development of his interest on the Old Testament pseudepigrapha, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the historical Jesus. I would like to conclude by telling an episode that was not recorded in this book, but that SACCHI has shared only with a few of us. Still a child, SACCHI developed a passion for languages and taught himself German, the language of Goethe and classical philology. When he was 13, during World War II, he learned that by knowing German, he had gained much more than he expected. Screaming in German, he jumped in front of a firing squad to save his own mother, who had already been lined up against a wall to be shot during a roundup. That brave and generous child has become the brave and generous scholar we honor today. Paolo, grazie. Siamo tutti orgogliosi di te. L'Italia è orgogliosa di te. Thank you, Paolo. We are all proud of you. Italy is proud of you.
Io sono contento che dalle mie lezioni, dalle mie piccole o grandi lezioni che siano state, sia nato un qualche cosa di così grande e ha coperto praticamente tutto il mondo. Sono orgoglioso, quasi non ci credo. Quasi non ci credo. Translate.
Thank you, grazie, grazie. Paolo is saying that he's so proud of seeing now so many people gathered together and is very, very proud that his ideas have generated such interest now all around the world, and he cannot even believe that something like this is happening now. Grazie, Paolo. Paolo is showing us the award that he had just received. Paolo has sent us an acceptance speech that Joshua Scott will now read to all of us.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the Board of Directors of the Enoch Seminar for the honor they have so graciously given me with this award and by including my name in such distinguished company. I greet with joy and best wishes all those who have worked and work at the Enoch Seminar, the directors, and especially Gabriele Boccaccini, who many years ago came from Turin, Italy, as one of my best students, certainly the one who had and has the widest interests. I praise his tenacity and ability to sacrifice himself at the beginning of his American life, as well as the hard work that led him to found the Enoch Seminar. It is a testament to his qualities as a scholar and a human being. I would like to mention two events that preceded the foundation of the Enoch Seminar. The first dates back to when Franco Bolgiani, professor of early Christianity at the University of Turin, felt the need to expand the interests of his chair to include the study of the Jewish environment in which Jesus lived. He needed a Hebraist to collaborate with. I was hired as his assistant professor. It was the year 1967. The study of the Dead Sea Scrolls was still in its infancy. I started studying them, not primarily for their relations to the New Testament, as many were doing at the time, but for what they were telling us about the history of ancient Jewish thought. To achieve this, I immediately realized it was necessary to make all existing sources more easily available. Hence the idea of publishing the first Italian editions of the Old Testament pseudepigrapha and of the Septuagint, with introductions and commentaries. I was not interested in theological or religious goals, but by the desire for a historical understanding of ancient sources. It was in this atmosphere that Dr. Gabriele Boccaccini arrived in Turin in the 1980s. The rest is history, a story of which Gabriele was made a part, and of which now he is a protagonist. It is the story of the Enoch Seminar. Thank you.
Thank you, Paolo. Thank you, Paolo. We appreciate very much and very, very, very happy that you were able to join us. Grazie, Paolo. Siamo molto contenti di vederti e siamo molto contenti che tu sia potuto essere presente con noi stamani e ti mandiamo i nostri migliori saluti da parte di tutti, di tutto il gruppo. Grazie ancora per tutto quello che hai fatto per noi.
For all.
Thank you for all of us.
For all.
Thank you.
Gabriele, thank you so much. Now it's my honor to bestow upon Professor Nickelsburg this Life Achievement Award, and it's only fitting that the Enoch Seminar celebrates him. For starters, Professor Nickelsburg was one of the founding members of the Enoch Seminar, participating in the very first meeting in 2001 held in Florence. And there following, he served as a major speaker at several of the meetings, including the seminars dedicated to Enoch and Qumran origins, the Book of Parables, and Jubilees. I would like to call attention also to the important scholarship of Professor Nickelsburg, from whom we've learned so much. His publications include Resurrection, Immortality, and Eternal Life in Intertestamental Judaism, Jewish Literature Between the Bible and the Mishnah, and Faith and Piety in Early Judaism, Text and Documents, which he co-authored with Michael Stone. All of these, widely appreciated and considered essential reading for any student in early Judaism, have appeared in second editions. Of course, Professor Nickelsburg has published numerous groundbreaking articles and essays, like Apocalyptic and Myth in 1 Enoch 6 through 11, and Enoch, Levi, and Peter, recipients of Revelation in Upper Galilee, which continue to be cited in 2020. In fact, as a testament to the enduring value of his scholarship, Peers organized and edited George W.E. Nickelsburg in Perspective, an ongoing dialogue of learning, a 2-volume work in which colleagues engaged several of his studies. We are especially indebted to Professor Nickelsburg for his 2-volume Hermeneia commentary on 1 Enoch. When one grapples with the textual challenges, the uneven witnesses to the significant anthology attributed to Enoch, the questions which linger about this collection's background and development, one realizes the tremendous challenges Professor Nickelsburg embraced in producing this most valuable resource for scholars. Professor Nickelsburg is not only a friend of Enoch, though. He's done so much to advance the study of pseudepigrapha. In fact, Professor Nickelsburg served as chair of the pseudepigrapha group of the SBL for 7 years and edited volumes on the testaments of Moses, Joseph, and Abraham, the latter with Bob Kraft, that made accessible for many and illumined significant pseudepigraphal texts. Thinking also of other leadership roles Professor Nickelsburg has played in our field, he served as co-chair of the Wisdom and Apocalypticism group at the SBL and edited with John Collins, Ideal Figures in Ancient Judaism, and with Bob Kraft, Early Judaism and Modern Interpreters. This native of San Jose, California, received his PhD from Harvard Divinity School, studying with Christer Stendahl, Frank Moore-Cross, and John Strugnell. Professor Nickelsburg, in turn, mentored and inspired a next generation of accomplished scholars, including Francis Flannery, Rodney Werlein, Nikolai Roddy, Randall Argall, and Beverly Bowe during his tenure at the University of Iowa. His students and his colleagues expressed their gratitude and admiration with a festschrift entitled, For a Later Generation, The Transformation of Tradition in Israel, Early Judaism, and Early Christianity. Please join me in celebrating George Nickelsburg with this award, for his contributions to our field are inestimable. And George, I think there's a moment if you'd like to say a few words.
Well, first of all, let's I not mention it. I want to salute Gabriele for spending a lot of time and a lot of energy to bring this seminar to pass over the last number of years. Gabriela, first of all, I salute you. Second of all, I want to salute my fellow celebrants here, whom I see Bob Kraft there, and Michael Stone. I'm not sure, and of course, PAOLO. Hello, PAOLO. Congratulations. So I want to say something nice about them all, and to say that I've enjoyed over the years spending my time interacting with them and with a few other people like Larry Schiffman I see there, and AJ and John, of course. So that's the first thing. But gee, Kelly, thank you for your kind words. And I appreciate them especially because they come from someone whom I respect for making significant contributions to a book that I have been reading over the last 50 years. Thank you, Kelly. I also want to thank the board of directors for recognizing me for the work that has consumed so much of my time. But beyond that, I want to commend the seminar for putting together a conference on a topic that sits squarely in our faces, even though it's not mentioned in the agenda. So often as it is, it was topics in the humanities, we study the past because it sheds light on our present world. Demonic, omniscient, destructive, invisible COVID-19. The era of Trump, Anonymous, the lawless one, grabbing hold of us all from a self-serving core. The chaos that has roamed our streets in America, begotten of hate and deadly in its effect. The three of them made worse as they mixed with one another. Now, if these embodiments of evil that we experience today existed in the Greco-Roman world, or where they did exist, we'd find them described in the language and concepts that are the objects of this conference. Or alternatively, our present experience of radical evil can maybe help us better to imagine and describe the real presence of evil in the ancient world that is the field of our study. In other words, the ancient texts help us to understand our world, and we can use our world to understand the ancient world. In the words of a wise ruler, there's nothing new under the sun. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to introduce, thank you, George. I'd like to introduce now Annette Reed, who will present the award to Bob Kraft.
Oh, so hello, everybody. It's good to see you. And I'm very delighted. I hope you can hear me well. Is it okay? I'm very delighted to be able to present this award to Bob Kraft. Bob Kraft is anyone who's attended an Enoch seminar knows is always the one who will ask you the question when you give your paper that rips the whole artifice down and makes you have to think about it for the rest of the time when you're there. And he's also always the one who's the first at the top of the hill when you're on the hike. So those of us who've had the chance to enjoy him in that capacity, and he's given an incredible amount to the experience of the seminar since in 2001 and its beginnings. But in addition to that, I just want to note especially some of the things that make him central to Second Temple Judaism in the last, since the 60s, and in ways that I think are particularly striking, not just from reading his CV or so forth, but especially for the ways in which he shaped the field in other fashions. One of the things I think that's most striking about him is that for everything that's changed since the 60s and 70s until today, the one thing that hasn't changed is the fact that asking and debate the very questions that he's always been raising. Questions about categories, questions about the tyranny of canonical assumptions, questions about what we are labeling when we want to study things as Jewish and Christian, how that affects how we study, how that affects what we don't study, what we don't see, how that also affects kind of questions about what we think of, both separating or not separating Greek language sources from Hebrew and Aramaic language sources. I often think rereading the multiform Jewish heritage of early Christianity, for instance, or other kind of key articles, that could have been written yesterday just as much as it was written in the 80s. And so too with so many of his works where the key questions that he's pushed are fundamentally not questions of the past that shape the past, but questions that we keep coming back to. And questions that are in some ways what makes the Enoch Seminar able to be a seminar, a place where we have to keep debating, keep having conversations, a type of seminar in which we end up giving our papers on a specific text, and then within the session and after and out into the streets of whatever wonderful city we are in Italy, continuing to debate with one another, are because of the types of questions that he's consistently, over the decades, raised to the fore. So I want to make sure to signal that as something I think is very, very powerful in his work, and also a way in which it's remained incredibly timely and important. There are a number of there are questions we haven't solved, and also questions where every time we think that we were in a satisfying place, Bob has been one of the people who kind of keeps pushing us to say, actually, no, you may like para-biblical, but maybe we should go with para-scriptural, what does that mean, or so forth. In addition to that, I want to note a couple other things, one of which is the degree to which he's also shaped the field through his advising. That if you were to make a list of the people who are his advisees, it's been a kind of a very incredible list, but the amount of people he's also mentored in different ways, including but also beyond PSCO, has been remarkable. And it's also notable the degree to which he also has shaped, both through his advising and his advising of advising and so forth, the degree to which of an inclusion of women in the field, from Martha Himmelfarb to Max Grossman and many people in between, of a way in which he was supported very early and frequently of ensuring further inclusivity in the field, including at moments where it was not an easy or natural thing to do. So if we look at our screen today, and our screen, of our Zoom pictures includes, people who look very different from one another. It is partially because of some of the work on the ground that Bob has done. And I want to make sure to honor him for that as well. And lastly, one of the things I want to also note is that I felt that it's very fitting to honor Bob among the, among those honored here in the Enoch Seminar's first electronic online conference, because that's another aspect in which I feel like a lot of the work he's done, including work that's visible, but also work that's less visible, kind of is in a way of like really from an incredibly early stage, pressing the idea that to do our scholarship on the past, it's incredibly pressing to have to keep thinking about technologies into the future and kind of keeping up. So from kind of very early electronic, creative use of database materials of electronic for communication means I think it's especially fitting now that when we honor him on these screens, we are honoring him in these screens, also in saying that if this is part of our imagination of what a conference can be, we owe to him an idea that he's been pushing us both to imagine the ways in which moving technologies can help us when we study the past. So thank you, Bob, for everything you've done. And I'm delighted to be participating in this honoring of you.
Bob?
I didn't need Enoch Seminar to remind me I'm getting old or older or whatever. I'm interested that Annette should mention running to the top of the hill. I don't run to the top of the hill anymore. Some of you know I had a slight stroke a couple of years ago. I can walk, I can limp, and I can drag a foot, but I'm not doing much running. I wish I were doing more swimming. Thank you very much, Annette. Those are very kind words. I'm blushing on the inside, even if it maybe doesn't show in the technology. My screen tells me every now and then that my connection is unstable. So I'm taking that as a personal comment, and you can do with it what you will. Thank you very much, Gabriela and Jason and the rest, Joshua, the rest of you, for this really unexpected and in some ways undeserved compliment on a career that I hope will continue to go on for another 50 years, but it probably won't. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Annette. Thank you very much, Bob. John Collins will now present the award for Michael Knibb.
Is Michael not with us? I don't see him.
I haven't seen him yet.
That's too bad. Michael made some very fundamental contributions to our field beginning in the 1970s. He did an edition of the, I think he has just joined us here.
Yeah.
I don't see him actually, but I see his name.
You want just wait one moment, John, that Michael will be in, I think.
There he goes.
There he is.
Okay.
Well, Michael, as I was just beginning to say, that you made some very fundamental contributions to the field. I'm thinking of your translation of First Enoch back in the early 80s, and then your 2-volume edition, which I suppose appeared actually before the translation, and which I think is still the most accessible Ethiopic text that we have. And also very fundamental contributions to the Dead Sea Scrolls. Just recently I've been working through your book on the Qumran community, especially on the commentary and the community rule, which is a model of a concise commentary. And it's really a pleasure to read. Also made very fundamental contribution in training some people who have gone on to become major scholars, like Sariana Mezzo and Charlotte Hempel. But all of this was only one side of Michael's career. he has maybe gotten even greater plaudits for his work in Ethiopic. If I remember correctly, it was for your work in Ethiopic that you were first elected to the British Academy, and then gave the Schweik Lectures, one of the most prestigious lecture series in our field on the translation of the Bible into Ethiopic. Quite recently, an edition of the Ethiopic text of Ezekiel, and just last year was recognized with the Ullendorf Medal for Semitic Philology by the British Academy. But I think what I remember most of Michael from his career and his biggest contribution to the Enoch Seminar was just his personality. That he always brought a clear mind, a reasonable perspective, and I'm not sure I ever saw the man get excited, and certainly not angry. So wonderful colleague, a wonderful stabilizing presence in seminars where such a presence was often needed. Before I got to know Michael, I thought the idea of an English gentleman was something of a myth. Having gotten to know Michael over the years, I can tell you that the species does exist, although it may be rare. Michael, it's a pleasure to see you and to recognize you.
Michael, we have some time.
Thank you, and I hope you can hear me. Thank you, John, for those very kind words. I really do appreciate them. We've known each other for many years, since first meeting at an SNTS meeting in what better place than Dublin. And I've always valued our friendship and almost always found myself agreeing with your scholarly judgment, sometimes frustratingly so, because you've anticipated what I might have said or wanted to say. But thank you, John. More to the point, I would like to thank Gabriele and the directors of the Enoch Seminar most sincerely for considering me for this Lifetime Achievement Award. I feel deeply honored by the award, not least to be receiving it in such distinguished company amongst such distinguished scholars. And I feel touched that you should have remembered me. I have very vivid recollections of the early meetings of the Enoch Seminar, and particularly of the very first meeting in Florence. And I've been pleased to see how the seminar has grown, and more importantly, how interest in what, when I began many years ago, could still be referred to as the intertestamental period, has flourished. I am conscious that in recent years, my own interests have changed, and that I've wandered from what might be thought of in this context as the true path. But I've certainly not lost interest in the literature of Second Temple Judaism and early Christianity. So may I again thank Gabriele and the other directors of the seminar most warmly for this award, and also take this opportunity to express the wish that the discussions on the origins of evil will be fruitful. Thank you very much, John. Thank you to the directors, and I wish the seminar well.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, John. Lorenzo Di Tommaso presents now the award to Michael Stone.
It is my honor and pleasure to present this Lifetime Achievement Award to Michael Stone Professor Emeritus of Armenian Studies, and Gail Levin-Denur, Professor Emeritus of Religious Studies at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. As with all our awardees, Michael requires little in the way of an introduction, which is thoroughly detailed in the two massive Festschriften that have been presented to him. When I think of Michael, as I often do, I am reminded of Christopher Wren's epitaph at St. Paul's. Si monumentum requiris, circum spice. If you seek his monument, look around you. My colleagues, if you seek a monument to Michael Stone, circum spice, look around you at the Enoch Seminar and who we are. For we are what we know, and when what we know changes, we change.
Yes.
Over the past half century, Michael Stone has helped change what we know in the sense of our knowledge and our horizons, and therefore changed who we are as scholars of early Judaism and Christianity. I mean this in two ways. First, Michael has contributed so much to revealing the richness and variety of early Judaism, which for a long time had been impounded and confined by theological fences and disciplinary boundaries. But in addition, and more importantly, Michael showed us new ways of understanding the material, through novel insights or by shifting the spotlight from one part of the stage to another. For example, with a single 1976 article, Lists of Revealed Things in the Apocalyptic Literature, Michael overturned the way that we regard the nature and function of apocalyptic speculation. This is no exaggeration. There's a direct genetic link between that article and current debates on the contents and social functions of apocalyptic thought, particularly with regard to the Enochic literature, the New Testament, the so-called Gnostic writings of late antiquity, and mystical speculation. Likewise, Michael Stone and his colleagues shifted the focus of the investigation from the origins of texts to the critical study of their reception, interpretation, and adaptation in later periods and cultures. A simple shift in theory, but one that was extraordinarily difficult to effect, since it barged up against generations of scholarly custom and philological tradition. I cannot overlook Michael Stone's extraordinary contribution to Armenian studies. Most of us never enter this field. We lack the necessary linguistic passport. But over the past 50 years, Michael has brought forth from this land a steady stream of literary treasures, almost single-handedly enriching our understanding of the reception of early Jewish and Christian texts, themes, and traditions. For his signal contribution, Michael has been awarded the Medal of Honor from the Mashtots Institute of Ancient Manuscripts in Yerevan and the Doctor of Armenology from the Armenian National Academy of Sciences. The tally of Michael Stone's scholarly output is staggering. Over 600 opera minora, plus dozens of monographs, edited volumes, and so forth, which range from the Hellenistic era to the end of the Middle Ages. One of the many signs of the gravitational field exerted by the tremendous mass of Michael's scholarship is that fully a third of the contributors to his most recent Festschrift are medievalists or Byzantinists. Another is his election to the American Academy of Arts and Science and to the Israel Academy of Sciences and Humanities. Then as now, Michael Stone's scholarship begins with the dictum that one must be able to read texts in their original languages. Only then can one begin to comprehend, with the application of critical methodologies, what the authors of the ancient texts were communicating. The more sophisticated a text, the greater the need to get into its notional world, to understand the work, so to speak, from the inside out. No scholar wishes to have his or her life's work reduced to a single book, so forgive me, Michael. But you may recall about a decade ago, when I was a guest at your lovely house in Jerusalem, I opined that although scholars a century from now will still be consulting your work, just as we now still consult works by James and Delman and Delille, your magnum opus is your magisterial commentary on 4th Ezra. There have been longer commentaries for certain, and many are equally erudite. But 4th Ezra is the most intellectually sophisticated apocalypse ever composed, and it required not only a scholar, but a poet to delve into the text from the inside out, to comprehend and relate the Odyssey of Ezra's soul, as you so eloquently put it. For this reason, among others, your volume on 4th Ezra stands paramount among a vast range of peaks, the Everest among commentaries. Michael Edward Stone, in concert with the members of the Enoch Seminar, we salute you for your contribution to scholarship in so many important fields and present this Lifetime Achievement Award to you.
Michael.
I'd either see the text or see you. So I have to see the text for a moment. Gabriele, Lorenzo, and dear colleagues, I thank you most sincerely for the honor you have done me in presenting me with this award. A Life Achievement Award is indeed affirming in these strange days. What I have done, as have all the awardees, is to stand on the shoulders of those who went before us. All our scholarship could not have proceeded without those who labored in this vineyard in the 19th and first part of the 20th century, and indeed before. I could take the whole 3 minutes allotted me and more to mention names, from Fabricius to Mina, Tischendorf to Charles, Couch to Riesler, Avram Kahana to M.R. James, just to mention some of those who made text available, discovered new documents, translated, edited, and published them. My own involvement started in the late 1950s, and the fellowship of my colleagues, the common interest, excitement, initial discovery, and enthusiasm shared without grudge and wholeheartedly have made my journey much richer. Gabriele, when you established the Enoch Seminar, I frankly admit I was a bit dubious about the undertaking. Now, many years having passed, I've come to admire your initiative and your early recognition of the creative potential of such an organization. I wish you much success for the future, as I do the advisory and steering committees and members of the seminar, with this important work of communications across seas and oceans, across lands and continents, bringing people together, giving them focus, enabling that crucial intellectual cross-pollination. These are great achievements of which you and the other leaders of this organization may feel proud for the past and ambitious for the future. I wish to acknowledge my students too, both those who were mine and put up with me for some years, and those who passed through, who visited for a year, came for a semester, and so often brought stimulating new perspectives from which we here in Jerusalem learned. Some years ago, Harry Attridge said that in my seminars, I made everyone welcome who could read the text in the original and dared to try to understand them. I'm sure he said that much more elegantly because it's Harry. After 6 decades in the field, I still assert with all my heart and mind that good philology is a principium sapientiae. However sophisticated one's methodological stance, one must first humbly listen to the men and women talking to us through the text, without prejudice, as far as we can, without preconceptions, and without an ideological filter. Listen to them as one listens to all the voices of the past, as far as one can, in their language, in their own terms, understanding within our human limits their concepts, their joys and pains, their faith and their doubt. It is our privilege indeed to listen, to learn, and to try to interpret. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Lorenzo, also. Finally, Jonathan Bendo will present the award to Devorah Damand.
I'm happy to, well, I'm proud and happy for the opportunity to present the Enoch Seminar Award to Professor Devorah Damand. The occasion is twice as happy because 2 weeks ago, we were notified that she has also won the prestigious prize Emet, sometimes called the Israeli Nobel, for her scholarship on the Bible and Second Temple Judaism. This is where you clap as well. These two awards celebrated by me today, or by the circle of people collected here, are by no means the first public recognition of her scholarship, and surely also not the last ones. She certainly deserves all of them, and many more to come. I would like to share with you a verse from Pesher Chavakuk, which, if you read it closely as I did today, I really think, in fact, this verse was written about Devorah Damand. And it says, when they hear everything that is to come upon the latter generation that will be spoken by the priest in whose heart God has put the ability to explain all the words of his servants, the prophets. Devorah Damand has been writing for many years and still does numerous studies on the Dead Sea Scrolls and apocalyptic literature. Many of these studies became highly influential and in fact set the stage in their respective fields. Since her range of studies was so wide, she was able to put her stamp in an astonishing variety of fields. The point is not only the sheer number of publications, but rather their quality, so that every piece that Devorah wrote became, you can say, canonical. Even if one does not agree with the actual content, Devorah's academic presence, or people say today, agency, give her work extra credence, a canonical, or as people say today, authoritative status. Indeed, for us in the field of apocalyptic and Qumran studies, her authority vies with that of Moreh HaTzedek himself. And since so much of her work involves interpreting the words of the prophets, she could justly be considered as the one that God gave wisdom in her heart to interpret the prophetic words. In these short words, I will highlight some of Devorah's scholarly achievements, and will also dwell very shortly on some personal circumstances of her career, especially those that concern this specific forum. Professor Damand represents the generation educated by the great names of the 20th century in Jerusalem: Gershom Scholem, David Flusser, Moshe Gottstein, Shmariyahu Talmon, and many others. David Flusser was her Dr. Vater, and that happened after writing MA thesis with Scholem himself. Devorah has channeled the wisdom that she learned from them, together with much of her own, to her students in Haifa and to her readers worldwide. When she began her academic career in the early 1970s, she was one of the first female scholars to take leadership role in the academia, and in many ways she was pioneer to the women scholars who went in her path. Devorah also made it a point to advise female graduate students, of course also male, but many also female graduate students, leading them through the hardships and the benefits of scholarship, and providing support for them as young scholars and even beyond. Her cohort of graduate students has a robust presence in scholarship on the Second Temple literature, successfully representing Israeli scholarship and Haifa scholarship in particular. Devorah was one of the first scholars to give a full philological and theological analysis to the myth of the fallen angels and to Enoch literature in general, together with some of the people honored here today. She has also made significant contribution to cataloging and estimating the phenomenon of pseudepigrapha at Qumran, in particular Aramaic apocalypses and Aramaic texts in general. She has published the pseudo-prophetic texts in DJD 30, a magnum opus requiring years upon years of work. Meanwhile, she established the journal Megillot with Moshe Bar Asher. Devorah is now writing a commentary on the book of Tobit, and she still has plans to write works and commentaries about Daniel, about the book of Watchers, and so many other texts. Devorah Hayekara, the circle of people gathered here today greatly appreciates your work and looks forward to embracing the work that you will yet produce in the coming years. May you find the health, the strength, and the energy that you have today to fulfill all of these important tasks.
I will say only a few words. I was really surprised that I was selected to this award. One is, as you well know, is used to sit in his own room, working alone, and suddenly people think that you should go into the light, should be appreciated. Looking at the people that are awarded with me, I'm reminded of the group I met first in the US when I started to come, and I see my youth, George Nicholsberg, Robert Kraft, John Collins, Michael Nebb, are all people with whom I really went along to the way. So it is in a certain way a reunion. And so I thank you. I'm really surprised and appreciate. And I'm glad to see my colleagues reaching this point and appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Devorah. Thank you, Jonathan. And thank you to all our awardees for your contributions to both our field and to the Enoch Seminar. Now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Lorenzo Di Tommaso, who along with Gabriele is the principal organizer of this meeting. Lorenzo will introduce our meeting's theme and share with you an overview of this first Enoch Seminar online. Lorenzo.
Thank you, Kelly. Welcome everyone to the first online Enoch Seminar on the conceptions of evil in ancient Judaism and Christianity. Many of you will recognize the basic format of the traditional Enoch Seminar in the structure of our online conference, with its invited presenters, formal respondents, and much time sheltered for plenary discussion. All of these are hallmark features of the workshop focus of the Enoch experience, as Kelly remarked in her opening address. For all that, however, ours is truly a born digital conference. In fact, as Gabriella mentioned, it was assembled only in late March and in less than 48 hours. Gabriella emailed me with the brilliant proposal for an online event on the topic of evil. I responded with the list of 10 core questions, which Kelly, Lauren, Gabriella, and I worked into shape and then fleshed out with a preliminary list of invited participants. Archie Wright and Ben Reynolds also made critical contributions. With only 3 months between the idea in late March and the event in late June, we could not ask presenters to compose full papers for pre-circulation to all conference participants, as is standard with Enoch seminars. So instead of a conference that revolved around 12 or 14 main papers, we opted for a series of 30 shorter presentations followed by brief responses. These presentations and responses were organized into 10 sessions, with the content of each session modulated by one of the focusing questions. Because of the need for brevity, we asked the invited presenters and respondents to consider using their time to broach new ideas or to propose fresh approaches or novel ways of considering the evidence, and to shy away from surveys or rehashes. Prospective rather than retrospective was our mantra. This brings me to the subject of our conference and therefore its architecture and goals. Plenary style conferences such as Enoch seminars function best when the topic is discrete and well-defined. A comparatively modest number of papers and a limited number of invited audience members mean that participants in traditional on-site seminars can drill down on the subject for 3 or 4 days of intensive, almost monastic diligence. This kind of workshop, however, is not possible in an online format, or at least not the one that we were compelled to craft within this 3-month window. We also knew that our conference numbers would greatly exceed the 65 or 75 persons that are normal to Enoch seminars. Indeed, as it turns out, we have nearly 300 registered participants. As I understand it, ours is one of the first full-blown online conferences on the planet since the global lockdown, as opposed to, say, a series of online public lectures. We planned big because we expected big. Our cardinal issue, therefore, was to ensure good registry between the conceptual and the architectural, between the function and the goals of the conference on the one hand, and the realities of nearly 60 presenters and respondents, 300 participants, and an online platform where these participants could select sessions in which they were interested, more à la carte than prefix. The topic of evil in ancient Judaism and Christianity works well to bridge the gap among concept, design, and function for 4 principal reasons. First, the topic of evil is of broadband interest across all major fields within the universe of the Enoch Seminar. My great regret, in retrospect, is that we neglected to include the patristic writers among the 10 sessions, an oversight that I hope we will remedy in the conference volume. Second, the topic of evil is one that to some extent may be comprehended in terms of origins, development, transmission, and adaptation across time. This diachronic dimension allowed us to arrange the conference around roughly chronological lines, beginning from the Near Eastern and Hellenistic social environments in which Second Temple Judaism took shape, and culminating with concepts of evil in Rabbinic Judaism and late antique Christianity. Third, the more general nature of our conference topic allowed for true interaction among the field areas. Let me unpack this a bit. The tightly focused topics that are common to traditional Enoch seminars, with their small groups of specialist scholars, can pose what are in effect translation problems for academics outside that specialist field area. A seminar on late antique apocalypticism, for example, would be largely unintelligible to medievalists, for the simple reason that late antique apocalyptic speculation is quite different from early medieval apocalyptic speculation by virtue of the difference between the 2 bodies of evidence and the academic presuppositions that have accreted around them. In short, apocalyptic does not mean the same thing to late antique specialists as it does to medievalists. This is what I mean by a translation issue. With the subject of evil, however, there exists a basic homogeneity of presuppositions across the field areas, a common language, so to speak, if necessarily rudimentary on account of its historical, regional, and theological variations. Translation problems still exist, but they are not insurmountable, and solutions need not always involve going back to first principles. These historical, regional, and theological variations constitute the 4th reason why the subject of evil is ideal for an online conference of this magnitude. The tension between a rudimentary language and these linguistic variations, so to speak, ensures a conference where participants comprehend an elementary syntax and grammar, yet probably do not share the same knowledge or vocabulary. For example, scholars of rabbinic texts might not know New Testament notions of evil, and specialists in both areas may be unfamiliar with ancient Zoroastrianism or late antique Gnosticism. But the presence of a common language, which is to say, the topic of our conference, the nature and notions of evil, permits meaningful dialogue among all the field areas, not only with respect to the evidence itself, but also, and perhaps more importantly, with regard to the kind of questions that are asked of this evidence and the context in which this asking occurs. In the final analysis, our online conference reflects the traditional Enoch Seminar format in its chief objective, which is the fruitful and constructive exchange of ideas among specialist scholars. The online format and nature of the conference topic has set the stage for a truly interdisciplinary conference, one in which we can come together in dialogue during these strange and perilous times. The 10 session questions are merely the spark by which we hope will initiate the flames of new ideas and fresh thoughts. Thank you. I believe that we shall reconvene again at 12 noon Eastern Time for the opening session of our conference and the question to which I posed to Gabrielle back in late March, and the one to which we will return in the conference wrap-up session on Thursday. If apocalyptic is the mother of theology, is then the problem of evil the mother of apocalyptic? Thank you, everyone. And I look forward to seeing you again in about 45 minutes. Goodbye.
Thank you, Lorenzo.
Thank you. Maybe Joshua may have to say something about the technical instructions about the participants.
Yes, thank you. Before we conclude the session, I want to provide a few brief technical notes. A great strength of the Enoch Seminar Conference is the small meeting size, where we usually sit in the round to address each other. To attempt to recreate this experience, we encourage participants to set their Zoom video to the gallery view. This option is located at the top right-hand portion of your screen. There are two ways to intervene in the dialogue in the sessions: the Q&A and raised hand functions located in the Zoom toolbar. We encourage people to use the Q&A function not only for specific questions to a panelist, but also for general comments. The more general Zoom chat function has been disabled. Those who offer comments or raise their hand will be called upon as time allows. If you are asked to intervene by the session chair, please accept the pop-up prompt to unmute your audio and video. If you're not able to join us for every session, we invite you to watch the morning recap sessions at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time that we posted on the Enoch Seminar Facebook page. So I believe this concludes our opening session. Lorenzo and Gabriele.
I look forward to everyone in about 45 minutes time.
Thank you to everybody. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Lorenzo. See you later.
Okay.